That's our own Phillies insider, Frank Klose. Frank, I was ready to rip these guys today, especially when the Giants took the lead. But finally, the script that we thought was going to be written, Bryce Harper comes through as the hero, not one but 2 home runs, including a moonshot that lands in McCovey Cove. How you doing this morning, Frank?
I'm well. You realize this is only 6 a.m. on West Coast time, so the people out there that stayed up for the game, this is way early for them. So luckily, I'm home.
Yeah, I'm home too, and but I'm still, look, the alarm went off pretty early this morning, and yet through the days in the fog, I thought they really did win that game last night. I can't believe it. That the number of times their record at Oracle or Pac Bell or AT&T Park, that's just their 4th win in the last 17 tries. I mean, they're normally terrible in San Fran.
Yeah, it's been a while since they had those hot lefty bats like Ryan Howard and Bobby Abreu that used to excel out there. So maybe Bryce Harper will be that left-handed bat that, that hits the ball into the drink like so many lefties do out there, and certainly Bryce Harper. It was a little extra sweet last night since the fans were booing him from the start. If you remember, he kind of spurred the Giants to sign with the Phillies. So those fans remembered that, and he rubbed it in a little bit more.
Yeah, he did the shh when he crossed home plate. Was that after the first home run or the second one? That was the first, right?
Yeah, the first one, I believe. Yeah, it was extra sweet.
So the Phillies, as they're currently constructed, are a half game back in the wild card. And by the way, look out for the Mets. We'll get to that in a minute. But in your opinion, as you wake up on August the 10th, are the Phillies a playoff team?
I don't think I know who the second wild card is in this National League. And I don't think the teams that are in it, so to speak, even know as well. There's a whole bunch of teams kind of bunched up in that middle ground there, just a little bit over 500, but basically playing 500 ball. And of all those teams, only really the Mets made an effort to try to win this wild card. So it's really hard to say because most of the moves that a lot of these teams made were just kind of to tread water. The Phillies seemed to tread water when they added Jason Vargas and they added Drew Smyly and they added Mike Morin and Blake Parker. Those are your big moves from the pitching side of things that they needed. And I mean, Dickerson is a very nice move, but it caught me a little bit out of left field, caught me off guard. No pun intended, because they had to get another lefty bat into the situation. But really, they didn't make any sort of slam dunk moves to address their pitching staff. They tried to play it safe. They didn't want to take a lot of risk. And so this will be one of those situations where you're going to get to the end of September and one of them is going to win the wild card.
Yeah, you're right about that on our website. Great article up there about on 97.3 ESPN.com about, only the Mets are really going for it. The rest of the teams that are out there, and there are so many teams that are in the mix, all kind of stood pat. Stand pat, that was Pat Gillick's nickname.
Yes, it was. And I think what the problem with this second wild card is every team that's analytic driven, they all recognize that if they get to the wild card game and lose it, then they've gone through great expenditure just to win nothing. So it's almost like instead of the teams used to do where they felt they had a shot at the wild card, which meant a 5-game playoff, they now realize, well, it's only for a 1-game playoff, and I don't want to take that risk, and I don't want to give up any prospects that will come haunt me later. Well, as we see time and time again, many of the prospects that seem like they're the slam dunk prospects that can't miss either don't work out that great or they take a while to be good players. You can look even recently with the Phillies. J.P. Crawford was one of the top prospects in baseball. And it's kind of clear he's becoming a nice player out in Seattle now, but certainly he was not one of those slam dunk players where if you could have added an impact player in a pennant chase that you can't give up. And some of their other big prospects, Maikel Franco was once the prospect number 17 in baseball. He's in the minor leagues right now, and we all lived through Dominic Brown. So for all the panic and fear of trading prospects, it's kind of a shame. And this second wild card has not really helped teams to want to go for it.
I thought your strongest sentence in the whole piece was that fans should feel duped. Do you think that's how they feel?
I think so, because, the message that was sent to fans after the Harper signing, now the Harper signing would have happened whether or not they were ready to win this year or not, because he was a long-term purchase. But JT Realmuto was not a long-term purchase. He's only signed through next year. So when you trade your best prospect in Sixto Sanchez to get a catcher that's only going to be with you this year and next, you're sending the message that, okay, it's time to win right now. You signed McCutchen. Unfortunately, he's hurt. You signed David Robertson, who, of course, had never been hurt in his career. All of a sudden, it's hurt. You signed him to a 2-year deal. You're kind of saying that here's our window. We need to make something happen. And then now that they're at the trade deadline, there's no more August trades. It seems like they were just kind of like, I guess we're not going for it after all.
Yeah, Sixto Sanchez, I mean, I've seen those tweets are already happening, right? Like where they talk about how great his numbers are and how he's their top prospect. And I mean, I see those go by sometimes and think, oh, yeah, that was the guy we gave up.
And, it's totally okay to give up prospect if you're going to get something quality in return, and you're going to go for it. At some point, you have to decide, all right, we're going to win. And then you take your prospects and you convert them into players that help right away. And if you do it right, you have a couple more years for the system to sort of rebuild that prospect pool, right? So even trading somebody like that for JT Realmuto, you're basically trading 6 years of Major League Sixto Sanchez to get 2 years of Major League JT Realmuto.
Okay.
But you would just better be ready to win for those 2 years.
Yeah, but everybody just reads Sixto Sanchez holds a 0.84 ERA during his 5-game winning streak. I mean, that one just hurts.
Yeah, and he was he was in the futures game on the national stage, and everybody got to see just how nasty his pitches are. And for fans that are seeing them trade the player and at the same time not win, that kind of hurts.
All right, let's talk about the trade deadline changing and the way things work, because producer Hunter Brody and I were talking off the air. I said, I heard Adam Hazley's name last night and thought, wait, I thought they set him down. Like Jay Bruce was barely there to, get stretched out and put tape on his wrists, right? He's already back on the shelf?
Yeah, unfortunately, he's up, and then he's right back down on the IL. And one unfortunate consequence, I know fans were kind of upset that Adam Hazley got sent to AAA. And last night I kind of tweeted when the Bruce news broke that, like, well, this is what you have to do in this no August trade era. You have to stash some people at AAA that you can go to later, because your backup plan needs to be in your minor league system. It can't be anywhere else. If somebody in your 25-man roster goes down, you're not getting that person from another organization. So, and the Phillies kind of felt forced to send Adam Hazley down to AAA, and luckily they did, because he came right back after the Bruce injury, and it didn't cost them anything. If they had cut another player, and I realized that the likes of Sean Rodriguez and Brad Miller aren't the jaw-dropping key assets off the bench. But if you cut one of them, well, guess what? They're now out of your system forever. And then
right.
Otherwise, and then today they'd be saying, okay, who do we have at AAA to come up? It could be Maikel Franco has to come back up, and you're still kind of but maybe it has to be Phil Gosselin, because he's the next guy up. So we've already had Phil Gosselin. So it's one of those situations where I get why they would have to stash somebody at AAA. Just like I think that had Adam Morgan not gotten hurt, Zach Eflin would be a AAA too.
Frank Klose is with us, our 97.3 ESPN Phillies insider. Follow him on Twitter at Frank Klose with a K. Yeah, you write about Bamboo, Brad Miller, and Sean Rodriguez. They can't be option to the minors. Hazley didn't even leave the Bay Area because, you got 72 hours to report, right? So he didn't even have to leave the hotel.
Yeah, that worked out pretty well, because if he had flown across from one coast to the other and came back, I was actually surprised that he was in the lineup already. So luckily he didn't get too far away.
So let's talk a little bit about the job Gabe Kapler's done. First of all, let's start with this. Your impressions of Gabe Kapler, maybe from year one to year two, have they changed?
Well, I think tactically he's made a few adjustments, but more and more the role of the field manager is really not about execution. It's really about managing the personalities in the clubhouse. And in the era where one of your players makes or signs at the time the largest free agent contract in history, you have a lot of work to do that has nothing to do with the baseball game. So somebody like Kapler it's usually about him getting the players on board with him, to like him, to be motivated to play for him. And I think that's what you really need to look at more. That's not saying that every decision I've seen I've particularly liked. I'm not a big fan of him changing the lineup up. It seemed like at one point this season he went back to the opening day lineup where they had success for the most part, as best they could with the injuries. And last night, it ended up being okay, but Harper batting leadoff, Dickerson third. I would probably like to see Gene Segura batting second, because every time he's struggled a little bit, you hit Segura somewhere else, and then he seems to fall off the rails. You put him back in his comfortable two spot. He said he loves batting second. He's excelled. So I would basically try to redo this lineup like opening day as much as possible, where you lead off Corey Dickerson and put him in left. He's kind of in the McCutcheon slot. And then 7 and 8, you have Franco's spot and Ojibwe Herrera's spot. But now you play them with Kingery and Adam Hastley. That's what I would do a little bit differently if I were Kapler. I'm not so much frustrated with the bullpen moves and stuff like that I frequently hear people say, because so much of the season was the bullpen on the fly, and you didn't know what you had. People were constantly going down, and he's finally kind of hit a stride where you kind of know for sure that those 4 big bullpen pieces are gone for the year, and people are starting to settle into their roles. Unfortunately, they're down Adam Morgan too now, so your top 5 relievers are all gone. And the ones he has, he kind of knows what roles they sort of slot into. For a while, it was kind of on the fly trying to figure that out. And I think that's not something that any manager would want to have to deal with. But, so I can't get too hard on him for that. But in terms of the clubhouse, the people like him. They like playing for him. There's a report by Bob Nightingale that if the Phillies did let him go, the Giants would be all over him at season's end. So I think, at least in terms of the people that are making those types of decisions, they're very happy with him. The Phillies front office is very happy with him, and I think for fans, it's really, at the end of the day, they just see the wins and losses, the frustrating losses, and that's how they gauge the manager. But in today's game, they really don't gauge the manager that way.
His quote on the record, Frank, is that I maintain that our job is to develop the players that we have in the room, when he was asked about roster moves. But, of course, if you look through the roster moves and the guys that they've brought in, you could sit there and say, look, if you compared where they were through 115 games this year as compared to last year, well, last year they were still 13 games above 500, tied for first place. This year, it's been an entirely different year, and yet they were supposed to have added these great bats. I mean, how much is Gabe's job to reconfigure the lineup, and how much is it like to be a motivator too? I mean, I knock him sometimes for being too positive. The players do all seem to like him and respect him. They've gone on the record as saying that, whereas in year one, Arrieta had some issues. Obviously, there was an unnamed Philly that was quoted as saying the guy was going to flame out. It looks like that's calmed down.
Yeah, and I think some of those negative voices are no longer on the team. I just my gut, not that he has said some stuff. Nick Williams did on the record say some stuff like, I guess the calculator says I shouldn't be in the lineup. Well, guess what? You're not a good major leaguer. You're not playing like a major leaguer. That's why you're not in the lineup. So maybe some of those negative voices have gone away. Maybe the veteran likes of Arrieta have sort of warmed up to him, or they've or after Kapler's gotten his feet under him a little bit more. He was a rookie manager, sort of doing it on the fly, having not managed even in the minor leagues. So, I take that back. He had a 1-year stint in
barely.
In between. I think it was when he was on the DL for a year. That's when he decided to manage a minor league team. But I think that the players have warmed up to him a little bit. We don't hear the likes of Arrieta speaking anymore, and you know what? Arrieta is going to speak his mind. So I think if there's a problem there, we would hear it from Arrieta. So I think a lot of that might have worked itself out, and I think Kapler was sincere when he was asking for feedback last year, and he did take it into consideration, because again, that's kind of the role of the modern day manager, to make the players happy, and I think that he has shown them that respect, that they could say what what was bothering them, and it seems like, at least clubhouse-wise, it's kind of smooth this year.
You know, Frank, a lot of people that defend Gabe say, like, they try to hold up the fact that because the bullpen is so decimated, it's pretty remarkable that they are 60 and 56 at this point with all the arms that they lost in the bullpen and all their big hitters, not necessarily, how terrible they've been with runners in scoring position, things like that. But then I think, the Yankees have had a bunch of injuries too, and they got a 9.5 game lead. Like, you can't just always go to injuries as the excuse.
Right. Well, I mean, the Yankees, I think, did have a deeper roster and a deeper system, and quite frankly, Brian Cashman was more likely to make some moves when he needed to make some moves. The Phillies front office has again taken a very conservative approach where they're afraid to trade anybody. So Kepler has had to deal with that as well, and I don't think that that's his fault. So and that's an extra challenge because I haven't asked any of the players, and I don't think I would get an honest answer anyway. But if you said to them, "Are you disappointed that the Phillies didn't make a trade?" They're going to tell you, like, "Oh no, we have a lot of confidence in each other, and we really think we can do this." But you got to wonder how much what the front office did not do weighs on the players that are still there.
It's interesting because Jimmy Rollins was the guest analyst last night, sat in between Ben Davis and Tom McCarthy. And then on the postgame show, Michael Barkan and Ricky Patalico asked him, like, all right, is this the start of something? Are they going to string some together? And in his answer, J-Roll was like, I would think, like me as the hitter, I would take the hitters over to one side of the clubhouse, like get the coaches out, get together and say, this is it, guys, this is our run. And people like to dream up that scenario, Frank, that there's going to be a leader. Is there a guy like that in the Phillies clubhouse as currently constructed? Do you think, is there a motivating or rallying guy, or are they all just kind of quietly, professionally doing their thing, but yet nobody's standing up and banging the drum?
Well, the guy that would have done it, unfortunately, is Andrew McCutchen. I think that he really does have that type of presence. I think that's why the Phillies got him. I mean, basically the Phillies decided between Michael Brantley and Andrew McCutchen, and there were two reasons why they went McCutchen. The first is that McCutchen had a stellar injury history. Unfortunately, that didn't work out. And the other was really the presence that he does have. And I think Andrew McCutchen is very respected, and I think that the Phillies really sorely miss having him around. He doesn't, when you have that type of surgery, you're not going on road trips. He has been around at home games, but it's not the same as when you're on the field, batting leadoff, sort of setting the tone. So I really think that injury is really going to be perhaps even above all, the entire bullpen getting injured except for Hector Neris. That's going to be the story of the 2019 Phillies is really losing their leader in Andrew McCutchen.
So as you're staying up late last night, thank you for that, by the way, and you're watching the Phillies and you're seeing the reports come in about the Mets. Describe your thoughts on where the Mets are, because we have Mets fans in our audience. We'll throw them a bone. We'll let you talk about the Mets a little bit, especially from the standpoint, too, of they're hot on the Phillies' heels.
Well, I think they're on their own heels, and I think that they're the best positioned team to win a National League wild card. And, I'm not a big fan of Brodie Van Wagenen. I think he had as this general manager that comes from being an agent and trading for his own players like Robinson Cano, which who didn't see that being a disaster? You're taking on 5 years at $24 million a year to add an over the hill player like Cano. I thought that was a stupid move. But signing Tim Tebow, still playing those games, he used to represent Tebow. So, so there's a lot of things about Van Wagenen which just seemed ridiculous. And but one thing that you got to give him credit for is he said, you know what, there's an opportunity here. Nobody else wants the wild card, so we do. And adding Marcus Stroman really kind of caught everybody off guard, and probably including the Mets clubhouse, and subtracting their worst reliever and giving him to the Phillies. Basically they've really changed their whole dynamic. I mean, if you look at their starting rotation, now they have Jacob deGrom, who's a Cy Young caliber pitcher. Noah Syndergaard's still there. You still have Zach Wheeler. They didn't trade Zach Wheeler. They have Steven Matz and now Marcus Stroman. I mean, that rotation could win you any night of the week. And the weakest link is Matz. I think that they're pretty well positioned to hang in there. And meanwhile, Lugo, their reliever, he has not given up a run since June.
That's nuts.
And so, literally since June, all of July, no runs. I didn't look at last night's box score carefully, but he had not given up a run in August either. So that's a pretty good place from which to play for a wild card. And even though Edwin Diaz was not what he was last year, which was arguably the best closer in all of baseball last year, they're kind of covered with thanks to Lugo. And no, Lugo did not pitch last night. So yeah, so he remains perfect since June. And Edwin Diaz, you know what? If he can kind of be half the pitcher he was last year, I think the Mets are perhaps best positioned to win that second National League wild card.
Frank Klose with us, our 97.3 ESPN Phillies insider. Real quick, we'll close with this, Frank. So the Phillies at San Francisco today, 4 o'clock start time. That's a national TV game, plus it may be on our air. I'm not 100% sure of that. And then the tomorrow night, they're on Sunday Night Baseball. That's a 7 o'clock start. Then they have Monday off, and they have a 3-game series when they return back home. 3 with the Cubs, and then another 3 with San Diego. I'm just going to give you a heads up, Frank. Next Wednesday, the big Nola versus Hamels matchup. Mike Gill and I are planning to attend that.
I'm planning to see you guys then.
There you go. I wanted to save the date. That was like hey, Frank, save the date. The MG and the PT are hoping to be there. You know, he's been giving me a lot of grief because I said I'd be at every home game, or I'd be at a ton of home games, and I've been to 2 as a fan. I was at Maikel Franco's walk-off home run against the Nationals, what's that, about a month ago maybe? And I'm trying to remember the first game I went to. I can't even remember if they won or lost, which is terrible. But, yes, we are going to come up and see Nola versus Hamels on Wednesday night, so we're looking forward to seeing you there.
I'm looking forward to seeing you, too. It'd be a great game. And, yes, today's game is on 97.3 ESPN.